Good afternoon, everyone. This is a clean sheet of paper. I'm going to crumple it up and now try to straighten it out. Take a look. There's still a lot of damage. I'm going to crumple it up a second time and again try to straighten it out. Maybe this time I'll try a little harder. Whoop. Whoa. It's a bigger problem and more difficult to repair or remove the damage. This paper is a metaphor for what happens when an infant or toddler has what psychologists call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic experiences that have major influences on the child's developing brain and body, with lasting impacts on a person's lifetime health. This first slide indicates the major sources of adverse childhood relationships. Let me tell a story about a real child and mother at one of the early childhood programs my family supports. The names have been changed, but this is an actual situation. Please pay close attention, because there's a lot going on in this story. Just over 3 years old, a boy named Jimmy rarely spoke or played. At his preschool, he sat quietly, eyes averted, or would whisper into the wall. He was far behind his peers in language development and social skills. At the end of each day, his mother, Tony, would come pick him up, but there was no expression of joy for Tony or Jimmy at the end of each afternoon. The mom was encouraged to allow a psychologist from the Westside Infant Family Network to visit their home and try to help. Tony agreed, and the therapist, whose name was Linda, arrived to find a very well-kept home. The television was on and remained on during the visit. Jimmy never looked up and kept talking to the wall, sometimes rocking back and forth. He was not interested in the toys that Linda found in the room, and he also didn't interact with his mother during the hour visit. So, what's wrong with Jimmy? Is he just a shy 3-year-old and that's his personality? Or is he on the autistic spectrum? Or is something else going on? Tony, the mom, shared with the therapist that Jimmy was the product of a rape at a party about 3 years earlier. The mom's own childhood did not have a lot of attention or love at home. She and her older brother were raised in a strict household by her unmarried uncle. While he was a good provider, he was quite formal, emotionally distant, and rarely at home. Tony could not remember ever hugging him or playing games with him, or even with her older brother. The mom, as a child, had experienced her own crinkled piece of paper and was now modeling her childhood as she raised her son. As weekly home visits occurred, the therapist saw that while Tony was providing a clean home, good food, and nice clothing for Jimmy, there was little emotional bonding between the two of them. Each week, the therapist worked to create some intimacy and some playtime between Tony and Jimmy. Gradually, Linda saw progress and became less concerned that Jimmy was on the autistic spectrum. Small things were quite important. For example, early on, Tony had mentioned that she couldn't remember Jimmy ever smiling. A couple of months into the visits, it was a big surprise when Jimmy turned to his mom, handed her a pretend glass of juice, grinned, and met her eyes. After about 8 months, the mother-son relationship was improved. Some additional resources were brought in, like speech therapy, and the preschool reported that Jimmy was more verbal and more social, and that his habit to speaking to the wall had stopped. Their home was transformed by turning off the TV and decorating the walls with Jimmy's drawings. The mom still doesn't smile much, but Jimmy does, and the two of them are frequently playing together on the floor and occasionally hugging each other. A child who had been withering away from emotional neglect was now on the road to a better life. Imagine if Jimmy's problems had not been addressed. What would this child's educational and social progress have been in elementary school and then in high school? If not addressed early on, how would his life have changed? Does he withdraw more? Does he become aggressive? So, what are the most important years for these early childhood experiences? Is it by age 10? Or is it by kindergarten? Or is it even earlier? Most every parent learns how important their child's early experiences are in shaping how they learn, how they relate to others, and the kind of person they become. In the past 20 years, brain scientists have documented how this happens. Research shows that early brain physical development is shaped by the baby's experiences, both positive and negative. The foundational brain architecture, both the size of different brain areas and their interconnections for important functions like language, cognition, and learning skills, are influenced by the child's early, first 3 years of life experiences. Let me say that again. Both the size of different brain areas and their connections for critical lifelong skills are influenced by the child's early experiences and are substantially formed by age 3. This slide shows brain synapse formation. The scale on the bottom horizontal is months, from prenatal until age 12 months, and then yearly. Brain connections go through a process of growth and then pruning, as the brain first builds the resources needed to accomplish tasks and then discards the less necessary material to allow the brain to work better and faster. Note the critical resource building that occurs in the first 3 to 5 years of life, and especially in the first 12 months, before the baby can even verbally communicate back to us. Here are partial lists of the skills that have their foundations established in the first several years of life. The list called learning skills includes the emotional and social skills that are critical for success in life, in school, in the workforce, and in relationships. These are the skills that strongly influence the degree of a person's mental health and personal fulfillment. While everything we become does not depend on these early childhood experiences, it's clear these are very critical years. Also, it's probably much easier to prevent problems by focusing on early childhood than it is to solve problems later on in the teenage years or as adults. Several studies have shown the impact of effective early childhood development. The most famous research, called Perry Preschool, was started in the 1960s in Michigan and followed the same people's lives for 37 years. Perry Preschool focused on 123 children who were given quality daily preschool and quality weekly home visits for 2 years, and a similar control group, of a similar sized control group, without these resources. While the human and qualitative impacts are most important, they're hard to quantify. Economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis have tried to estimate the financial impact of the Perry Preschool outcomes versus the control group. Do you think the payback was 4-to-1, or do you think it was 10-to-1? In fact, the benefits to cost impact was found to be $16 of benefits for each $1 in cost. $16 to 1. Quite a return on investment. Benefits included higher earnings for the participants, but most of the benefits came from lower costs to the community. Lower costs in education, health care, welfare payments, and the criminal justice system. Returning to the crumpled piece of paper and the impact of adverse childhood experiences, the Harvard Center on the Developing Child has studied the impact of multiple ACEs on health and behavioral outcomes. This slide shows the increased likelihood of heart disease for people who as children experienced ACEs. For example, people who experienced 7 or 8 ACEs were 3 times as likely to have heart disease as people who experienced 0 to 2. This next slide shows the impact of multiple ACEs on adult depression, with incidence jumping with 3 or more adverse childhood experiences. I want to turn now to the positive experiences that can enhance early child development and increase the likelihood of those favorable teenage and adult outcomes. Please look carefully at this slide. It's a list of actions in early childhood that can be taken to help develop healthy, resilient people and a stronger society. For the over 25% of American children, 25%, that's millions of children, and also for the additional large group who grow up in middle and upper class families that are dysfunctional to varying degrees, the difficulties in changing behaviors are significant. But the implications for a civil society, for economic strength, and even for national security make it imperative that we strive for improvement. In my final minutes, I'd like to share with you some of my personal journey that led me to feel so strongly about this area. My wife, Mindy, sitting there in the front row, along with our 3 children, created the Tikkun Olam Foundation. Tikkun Olam are Hebrew words that mean to heal the world, and that's what my family hopes to be a part of. We'd been involved with various educational and social service programs for children for many years before that. Programs to improve K-12 educational outcomes, programs to reduce substance abuse, and programs to reduce gang membership. As we volunteered in these areas and learned about the causes of these behaviors, it became clear to us that a significant causal factor was poor early childhood experiences for these children, for these people. An example is what we learned from our involvement with homeless families at an organization in Pasadena. We learned that these behaviors tend to repeat themselves from generation to generation. Remember the story of Tony and Jimmy. We also learned that the parents of these homeless families obviously don't intend to perpetuate this cycle. The parents tell you they want to be good parents, provide for their children, and help their children have better lives than they've had. But watching them, it frequently became clear that they don't know what to do to improve their children's future. And they frequently don't have the community or family support to overcome this lack of knowledge that most of us in this room had when we were children or for our own children. In our lives, when it was needed, we had inputs from family members, friends, or professionals to guide us. Child development issues ranging from proper nutrition to school readiness to social and emotional skills were part of our daily lives, whether we called them by those labels or not. Thus, my family decided to focus our philanthropy on improving early childhood development, including direct program efforts, like the one at the Homeless Center, and the education of as many people as possible about the social, economic, and health benefits from effective early childhood efforts. From conversations with others, we discovered that most people don't know about the prevalence of child neglect and the impact that troubling early childhood experiences can have on the rest of a person's life. In particular, many people don't see the possibility and ways to intervene, preventing the harsher outcomes. Very simply, most people honestly don't know this is a problem, a big problem, and you can't solve a problem if you're not aware of it. My dream My passion is to help make early childhood development a national priority. For me, the logic and evidence are compelling. For many of you, the importance of this may be a new area. I hope you're motivated to learn more and find involvements that fit your interests, whether at your own children or the charities you support. In addition, I urge you to share this information with others. If we're going to make early child development a priority in our society, we all need to reach many people with the evidence of why it's so important. As an example, think back to the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings about 2 years ago. It's impossible to prove that any specific early childhood effort could have prevented the mental illness that led to the event of Sandy Hook. But research has shown that these efforts clearly result in better functioning people and better outcomes on a wide variety of measures. Remember, the first step to solving a problem is to identify and understand the problem. The next step is to share that knowledge with others and move towards solutions. These are two of my grandkids. On the left, Georgia, on the right, David. For them and for all infants and toddlers, what will it take for their early childhoods to lead to healthy adults and a stronger society? Let's talk about the importance of early childhood development and encourage those solutions. Thanks very much for your attention.